Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, Dr. Tiff, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Coach Val?
I'm doing pretty good, I have to say.
We're back again for another Tuesday talk.
Absolutely.
Got to love it. I know last week we celebrated you because you were done with the school year, and we joined you in your exhilaration.
I still got some of that.
You keep having it. Don't lose it. Don't lose
Yeah.
it at all. So we celebrate any other teacher or parent who has reached the end of the school year, whether it was a great school year, a tumultuous one that kind of wiggled between both ends of the spectrum, and
Absolutely.
we celebrate you for making it to the end. So take that break. Last week, we did a great episode about summer camps and shared some really great tips and strategies for finding a great summer camp for your kids. So if you haven't checked that out yet, either catch the replay on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, or you can go over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and listen to the audio there. So I think it's a good segue for our topic tonight because last week we talked about how to get these kids active and engaged for the summer. But I think, and I'll just speak for myself, I don't want to pull everybody into the vortex that I'm in, but inevitably for me and my son, video games become part of the summer. And what about for you?
So, when I think of the children getting out of school, the number one activity that comes to mind is, oh my gosh, now you guys can stay up and play your video games. You don't have to worry about being sleepy at school in the next day.
Yeah,
So I think it goes without saying, especially the culture and the times that we live in right now. These
definitely.
kids are going to be on some games for the summer.
Yeah, yeah. And so I'm always trying to find the balance between enough to satisfy a child, but also to keep a boundary as a parent as well, because you just can't sit and stare at the screen all day. Like we just can't
No,
do that.
no.
So do you put any boundaries or restrictions on your kids' video games?
I do. We do. Me and my husband. You're right. They can. Like I think me and you have talked about this before. Like it's making your brain mushy. Like it's turning it into sludge, basically, if that's all you're doing, especially depending on what type of game it is. And so we restrict them. My oldest has a schedule right now because he's the one. We talked about the older they are, the harder it is to find something for them to go to.
Yep, that middle
So
school
Yep.
level.
So
Yep.
me and him sat down and made him out a little schedule of when that gaming and stuff can happen and the other things that need to happen during the day besides that. So yeah,
I like
definitely.
that. I like the idea of creating the schedule with him. So it's not like you just imparting all the boundaries on him, but coming using some collaboration. Of course, mama and daddy have the final say,
Of
right?
course.
But making it a collaborative effort, I think helps the kid feel more empowered and then
Mhm.
also helps them feel like they have a voice. And I know we've talked about that many times in past episodes. So, do you do the same for your younger son too?
Well, I haven't because he goes to camp, all day camp that the YMCA does. But what he's going to get, I'm gonna sit down with him and talk about after camp when we get home and
Mhm.
kind of what that needs to look like because he needs even less time, sitting with an iPad or a Switch game in front of him. So I plan to. It'll look a totally different, obviously, because of his age. But yeah, I think he also, no matter what age, they should have some agency in their day and what they're doing. I think that helps them and preps them to become good decision making adults for their lives.
Oh, I totally agree with that. I love that. I love that. So, for my son, he mainly uses his iPad. So, on iPads, you can set up screen time restrictions. So I put time limits on there for him. So games has a certain number of hours he can play per day. Other apps and app categories, I can set a specific amount of time that I want him to play. But then I've also set the time that all of those apps even become accessible. Because what I don't want him to do is wake up
Mhm.
7 o'clock in the morning ready to play video games. I want you to get your rest. I want you to sleep. So those apps and games don't even unlock until 9 o'clock. So you can wake up early if you want, but you're gonna have to go find something else to do.
I didn't even think about that. Like, I know, I'm sitting here like, "Oh my gosh," because I've had this issue with the youngest one, that he'll
Mm,
get up first thing in the morning, and I'm like, "Dude, it's not even the sun ain't even up yet. No, you can't play no game. Like, what are you talking about?" But it is on an iPad, so, like, we don't even have to have this conversation.
right. And if you have an iPhone, you can control it all from your phone. Like it will tell you how many times your kid picked up their iPad. It will tell you the first time of the day that they picked it up. Like it gives you it will tell you down to the minute how much time they spent on certain apps. So if anybody out there watching has an iPad and also have an iPhone, for me, it's been a really easy way to set boundaries that I don't have to remember myself. Like the tablet is going to remind him when he's met his limit. The tablet is going to let him know when those apps are accessible, when those games are accessible. And it just takes one thing off my plate to have to remember or monitor um, throughout the day. And if he wants extra time for certain apps, he can send a request and it pops up on my phone. And I can either approve it for 15 minutes, an hour, or all day, or not approve it. It's
I love it.
perfect. So if anybody watching has an iPad that their kid uses and you have an iPhone, I encourage you to check out the screen time. You can really get very specific with the restrictions for time that you set up and even the type of content as well. So I even have it set up that his messages, his iMessage, after a certain time, only text messages from me, my mom, and his dad can come through.
Mhm,
Anybody
mhm,
else, he's not gonna be able to see it until that app unlocks the next day. But
mhm.
but I try to restrict it. I try to be a little less restrictive in the summer because during the school year he doesn't get to play video games during the week, only on the weekend. And so, summer, if he's not in camp, I encourage him to do other things, go he likes to draw, so, you know, try out some new anime character you wanna draw. What are some alternatives that you give your kids for video games?
I have to get better about offering the alternatives when it's not a situation where I'm giving, punishment, like after I've taken it away.
Gotcha.
But that tends to be when it happens. But so some of the things, or especially if they say like I'm bored, I'm like, well, like you said, there's drawing that you can
Mhm.
do, coloring if you like it. The youngest one still has an easel that has a whiteboard on one side and a chalkboard on the other side.
Okay.
So doing stuff on that. Um, they like whiteboards and and they like that kind of stuff. So that reading, obviously, but then like going back old school, like
Yeah.
huge trampoline outside, dude. That your grandparents bought you for Christmas, and now it's hot enough to go
Yep.
out there. Let's go try that out, okay?
Yeah.
Or just I know some old people are like, go hug a tree and make friends. But no, I really want them to get outside more too.
Yeah.
So I keep reminding them of those kinds of things. When we didn't have devices, this is what people did. You want to go ride your bicycle? Go do that. You want to go dribble the basketball outside on the pavement
Yeah.
for a little while? Go do that. You don't have to stay out there forever, but it's an alternative. You have plenty of things that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I'm guilty of this, and maybe I'm alone, maybe I'm not. I'll just confess that sometimes it's more work for me helping him find alternatives to the video games than it is to just let him play it. right? Like I work from
Mm.
home. So if he is sliding me notes next to my computer because I'm in a meeting on Zoom, asking me for more time on, I don't have time right then to help him navigate some alternatives. So it's just like, yeah, yeah, whatever. I'll approve your request for more time. And so it can become easier to just give in. I think it takes more awareness
Mhm.
and being present to really think about some alternatives too. Because there was a time when I was just like, go find something else to do. He didn't know what else to do. Like it was he's so hyper focused on that one thing that he didn't really couldn't really think of, oh, I do have toys that I like to play with. Oh, I do have this activity that I like to do. Like his mind just like shuts off from all other
Everything
enjoyable
else.
experiences because you have this singular focus on I need to play video games. So
Mhm.
I have to do a bit more work on my part, which, is part of the parenting gig. That's what we signed up for. But I have to do a little bit more work. So I have used video games as a crutch, especially on long car rides when I want to listen to my own podcast and
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to the music that he wants to listen to. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, play your games in the back seat. And it gives me a little bit of peace and quiet. Am I
I
alone
think
in that?
I think that's an extenuating circumstance. Okay, I
Okay.
think that's an except long car rides, like, yeah. Um, but so it's interesting. At this point, Parker kind of knew if he says I'm bored, and I'm gonna be like, well, go figure it out, dude. And I'm not coming to help you. Like there, and not just at this age, because I mean he's 14 now, so obviously he can
Yeah.
think about that cognitively. But I was trying to, as you were talking, I was trying to think of what age was the earliest where I drew the line and I said, I'm not gonna do this for you. You're
Mm,
going to have to go figure it out, and
yeah.
don't come aggravate me, trying
Yeah.
to make me do it. I think about 7 or 8.
Okay.
I had drilled so much what other things could be
Mhm.
done that I'm just like, okay, you're bored. And I won't even give it any more energy. And so I started kind of doing that with Matt as well.
Yeah.
We're about at that age where he's been told enough times. But then I also thought, because all kids are different,
Yeah.
like it'd be cool to have a list hanging on the wall or something somewhere that has all of the different activities. Here's what
Yes.
you can do when you're bored. And
Yep.
then even if you want to go further, put a sticker by what you've tried before. Just
Mhm.
something to make it a little interactive. I don't
Yeah.
know. I was just thinking that came up.
I like that. I'm a list. I got sticky notes all around me right now. I like a
I
list.
know.
Makes me feel organized. It makes me feel like I've accomplished something. So I think that's a really good strategy. And you can be as fancy or as simple as you want it to be, right? It could be a white piece of printer paper that you or your child writes out what the alternative activities are, and
Mhm.
then they can check them off, scratch through it, write another list for the next week or next day, whatever. I think that's a great suggestion for sure. So as we talk about gaming, I say a lot of times to my son, like, video games will turn your brain to mashed potatoes and then it will ooze out of your ear. So we can't just play video games all the time. I'm extreme in my thinking, so I have to go all the way there with the drama.
It's colorful. I love it.
It will ooze out of your ear, and then you're nothing but just a body. So in that, I really tried to be thoughtful about what I say yes to because I opened the door to video games for him to play them a while ago. And
Mhm.
so, of course, you play the little kitty games, you get a little bit older, you want to play something a little more challenging. Now your friends are talking about what they're playing. So now your kid wants to play that too. And everybody's parent doesn't have the same outlook on video games because we'll talk about um, in our next episode, part two of video games, we'll talk about some of the research that shows the positive and negatives of video gaming. But some parents don't see a problem with it. It's great. My kid can play all the time, any games he wants. And when that doesn't match up with my parenting style, then I get questions like, well, so and so's mom lets him play. Why don't I get to play? And now I'm stuck looking like the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, have you seen any like adverse effects from him playing any of his games too much or particular types of games?
Yeah, he advanced from some of the just playing in that community kind of setting on in the video game to more like battle style video games. And at first I was completely against the battle style video games where I'm like, no, I looked it up. It says online that this is for kids 13 and up. You're not 13. So, and then it went from that to him like, again with the whole question, so and so gets to play and he's my same age. He's telling me like why it's not that bad. I'm Googling it and looking it up myself because I don't know anything. I played Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt,
Same.
Bubble Bobble, if anybody remembers that, Contra. That's my generation. So I don't know anything really about these new games, but I finally said yes to the battle style video games. It doesn't have any gore, there's no blood, it's eliminations, not kills. Very strategic in the way that they label things. And I think after 2 weekends of him being able to play that, because I don't let him play video games during the week, I saw a real change in his attitude, his mood, and just his overall just demeanor in the house. So when it's time to be done with the video games, I'm saying, okay, it's over. Okay, I just need one more minute. I just need one more minute. That wasn't new.
Right.
But when it got to the point where he is like speaking in a disrespectful tone to me, saying things to me that are like out of character for him to say to me, I'm like, what the heck is going on? And it wasn't just happening on the weekend when he played the game, it was like this delayed effect. So I would see these changes
Mhm.
during the week when he wasn't even playing the video game, when he
Mm.
can't watch um, videos online about the games. And I was like, what is going on? So after 2 weekends and 2 weeks of that drastic shift, I was like, oh, heck no. No, no, no. This video game is the culprit. And I will root it out from the bottom. And I was like, and we're done with this. And so it was really hard because what I should have done is just stuck to my guns in the beginning and just said no. Because it's so much harder to take it away once
Mhm.
you access it than to just never give access at all. So, any
Yeah.
parent out there, if you're on the fence about the video game, if you feel in your gut that it's not appropriate, just stick with the no.
Right.
Stick with the no. That would be my suggestion because trying to undo, I call it unring the bell. You can't do it. You've already rung the bell. And so now I'm kind of dealing with the fallout or the consequences from that, I would say. But what about you? How did your kids get into video gaming? Was it a slow kind of trickle down type thing, or was it they were just in it full throttle right from the beginning?
So the oldest, it was similar to what you described. Is we had the kiddie games. One of the kid toy companies had the pad for the kids that I mean it had a ton of educational stuff. Like you said, it was great for that. Like I remember him just telling me all kinds of facts and stuff. And I'm like, how'd you know that? Oh, I learned it on my game. And I'm like, oh, okay,
Oh,
well, this is great. To the point where he wanted to go visit the country of Kenya.
oh wow.
When I asked him, like, where would you want to go? And that's what he said. So that was all great. But like you said, as they get older, those games become kiddie games.
Hmm.
So with him, there was gradual, steps up
Yeah.
from it. With the younger one, though, he went in it a little more forcefully because he had an older brother who was
Yep.
doing it by the time, he got old enough to realize what was happening.
Hmm.
But I'll also say, similarly to yours, is with the older one, there was this game that he was playing that was very popular. It's still very popular. I think they actually even use it in like esports
Oh wow.
for competition. And I started noticing, unfortunately, not very quickly, but I started noticing a change in how he would react and respond to me and his dad or his brother, or like when it's time to stop. Yeah, he'll say I need more time, or I only needed a few minutes, but he became more aggressive
Mm,
with saying it, with a whole lot more attitude, and this just was not who I had known him to be as a
right.
child. So
Yeah.
me and his dad talked, and we were like, this is not a good thing, and we had to get him off of it. And we were like, you cannot play this whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, and it took a little while, but eventually we started seeing the child we used to know.
Yeah.
Um, and that in itself is like, parents, you want to pay attention to those types of things, because if you and me hadn't caught that in our kids when we did, those are the types of habits and responses that if they keep going and festering and growing, the kid and everybody else thinks that's just part of who that kid is. That's just part of their
Mhm.
personality, and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there are research studies out there that show that exposure to violent video games can contribute to aggressive behaviors in kids. I mean, there's multiple research studies out there. And I think what got me on the battle style video game that my son wanted to play was that I I saw videos of it online. Like I said, I researched it, and to me, it didn't seem violent. Like they're
Mhm.
battling, but nobody's brain is coming out of it. Like it's not one of those types of games where like
Right.
somebody beheaded or like chopped in half. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Back cracking on a rock or something. It wasn't like that. And to me, that is what I thought of when I thought violent games. And I'm like, okay, this isn't that. But I'm looking at it from the mind of a 40 something year old, not
Mhm.
the mind of an 8-year-old that
Mhm.
hasn't had varied experiences to adequately place this type of battle or aggression from this game correctly in the spectrum of violent games, right? Like, again, it's not the most violent, but it is still an aggressive, battling game that can create that tension in the child because as I was explaining to him the other day, like and there's research to support it. It's a well-known fact that these video game companies hire psychologists to help them figure out how to make their games more immersive. And by immersive, they mean addictive. What is going to keep the kid coming back? So I was explaining that to Uriah the other day, like, hey, you started playing these games. It was real easy to beat it, get to the next level, whatever it is for that particular game. And then as you kept going, it got harder and harder because they want to get you in where it's like, oh, I'm really good at this. And then it shifts to, oh my gosh, I got to keep playing so I can get better and better. And that's the hook. That's the
Girl,
hook.
they got me like that. These little games on these iPads. This is some cooking game I'm on right now, and but no, the kicker, when I knew I had a problem, there was this other game, and no lie, moment of transparency. Don't be judging me out here. Okay. Remember setting my clock. It was one of those timed games. I remember setting my clock to wake up in the middle of the night so I could do the thing at the end of the time and then go back to sleep. I said, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. Delete. Okay. There is nothing that's going to. I had to delete it.
And
Yeah.
see, and that's Val at 40 something that can say, hey, this is a problem. I
Mm-mm.
shouldn't be getting up in the middle of the night to do X, Y, and Z on the game. But as a kid, it's just like it seems normal. They might be talking about it with their friends and they do the same thing.
Yeah.
And And so we just have to keep that in mind. I think when you are looking at these video games, that you're seeing it through the lens of an adult that has been desensitized to a lot of things
Yeah.
because we, lived a while. So just making sure that we're considering their developing mind. We had a two-part series on executive functioning a few episodes ago. You know, this all plays into that as well. So I think it's really important to really keep an eye on and gauge what changes you may see in your kid. If you
Yeah.
have another parent in the house with you, the two of you, like comparing notes, basically, like, have you noticed this? Have they been acting like this towards you? Because this is what I've seen, so that everybody is really, excuse me, on the same page.
Yeah, and that's so important to be on the same page because the kids will think about the types of games that are popular and out now. They're all about strategy and manipulation and all those kinds of things. So, which begs the question, like, are there some benefits to these games? Can they be used for like education, for example, because they are working their mind? Like they do, some of these games do have some intricate types of strategies that you have to come up with in order to be successful. And
Mhm.
as you keep going higher and higher. But that's definitely something that you have to watch out for and be on the same page about.
Yeah, and I know next week we're going to really dive in and talk about the pros and cons. There are lots of research articles out there that support video games because it does improve cognitive development, brain function. And then there are also those research articles that are like, no, this has a negative impact. And so you could even see a difference if you have multiple kids. You can see a difference in how maybe video games have impacted one in one way and your other child in a totally different way. So
Mhm.
what worked for one may not work for the other. Um, so we'll definitely share some of those for next week, talking about the research that's been done, and then also share some more tips and strategies for gaming safety, those restrictions that we talked about today as well, and setting those boundaries. Val kind of alluded already to what we'll talk about next week with having your kid be a part of that boundary setting, have them be a part of the restrictions that you place on them, and really explaining why.
Yeah.
Even if it's just as simple as, you need to not wake up early in the morning looking to play video games. I want you to go have some cereal, watch some cartoons, be a kid, and then, have your time with the video games. You can be as simplistic in your explanation as you want to be, or more in depth if you feel like that's necessary. I always have gone by the thought of like explain something to the child's level of questioning. When they stop asking you questions, your explanation is sufficient.
Mhm.
If they're still asking you, but why and how come I can't, then maybe there's a need for further explanation. But once they stop asking questions, the explanation is check done for that
Yeah,
moment.
or if they start repeating the same
Yeah.
question. Like
Oh,
at that point, okay, you've been told, you obviously get it. You just don't like what you're hearing right now. But just know you got an explanation. We're the authority. This is
yeah.
what we said, so this is how it's gonna go. And now you know why. We
Yeah.
done, sir.
I always say there's a time for negotiation, and then there's a time when it's just because I said so. So
Absolutely.
definitely setting those boundaries. So hopefully everybody watching or listening on the podcast gain some information on video gaming, and just maybe even just cause you to think a little bit deeper on what changes you could be seeing in your kid, positive or negative. It could
Mm.
be either one. And then definitely tune in next week because we are going to dive into the research that has been done to support both the positive and negatives for video gaming. And I'm really excited to talk about that because I really, honestly, don't really see any positives in video games. I just don't. So this even eye-opening for me as we were putting together, the show notes for next episode. So taught me something. So tune in and hopefully it will teach you something as well. Don't forget to check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Search up Tuesday Talks. And we will see you all next week. Have a good one.
Bye.